So I lost 6 figures of my money. I lost all my money. I lost my apartment. I lost my boyfriend because I didn't trust him. I lost my best friend who introduced me to my boyfriend. I mean, literally everything, all my money, everything. But it was really just a amalgamation of just everything I've been through, having no proper help, never drank a lot, never really had any vices. Like I seemed like I was fine and I was like cute and like dressing nicely and everything seemed fine and I was very good at faking, my happiness and all of that. And so I sat on my floor and I said to myself, you have a choice to make. You can either
Welcome to the Heartbreak to Happiness Show with Sara Davison. If you're struggling with a breakup and you feel shocked, angry, betrayed, devastated, or sad and alone, then this podcast is for you. Best-selling author and award-winning host Sara Davison shares how you too can get on with your life to heal, grow, and move from heartbreak to happiness. Here's your host, Sara Davison.
Welcome back to the show. I am super excited today because I have a very, very special guest from across the pond, Diana Mandel. Now, let me introduce you to Diana. She's an author, a speaker, and a dating and relationship expert who's been featured on NBC, Forbes, the New York Post, the Chicago Tribune, Time Out, and Maxim as one of the top relationship experts worldwide. So I'm very excited she's here. And she's celebrated for her bold and groundbreaking methods. She's known to her clients as the fixer and to the world as the anti-therapist. Diana's philosophy is as simple as it is provocative, which is therapy is bullshit. So, a very warm welcome to you, Diana. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I'm very excited because I'm really intrigued by this therapy is bullshit. So can you start by explaining why do you think that?
Sure. So I have my degree in therapy. I went to school for 6.5 years for what I do. And I think for me, I realized along the way, both in my schooling and the beginning of my own business, that traditional therapy is antiquated. It is really set up for insurance companies and therapists to line their pockets with money, and it doesn't leave clients with much. Therapists are not marketers. They don't want to fish for new clients, so it behooves them to have clients in these seats for years on end. And it's what I call sitting in dirty bathwater, where you're just kind of sitting in your own problems. And when you're sitting in them, you feel overwhelmed by them, so you feel like you need to be in therapy, but the therapist isn't really doing much. And a lot of therapists don't actually help. There's statistics out there that show that about 25% of therapists actually do good. 50%, kind of do nothing, doesn't hurt or harm. 25% actually does harm, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, I've
And
met some of them.
25% do good, right? So, and good, I don't know what good means. There's just not a lot of action. And 45 minutes a week of doing anything is not going to do it. If you need to lose 50 pounds, do you think that a fitness expert is going to tell you to go to the gym for 45 minutes a week? They're not.
No, a bit more, I think. A lot more.
And it's a daily practice, and there's strategies, there's tools, there's ways of being that need to be ingrained in people to move the needle, to do things differently. I literally just got off with a client and we were talking about reframing thoughts and redirecting and creating, what happiness is to you and living life through the lens of who you want to be and not who your trauma, has told you or taught you to be. There's a lot of work to be done. And the people who say they don't need it are the ones that need it the most. And so I think, again, the whole practice is not set up for clients to do the work, to be accountable, to do work outside of the sessions. One thing that I love so much about what I do is that I give support outside of I do around 55 minutes, but outside of that hour, call it, of the week, my clients will often reach out to me daily because of accountabilities and questions and where they get stuck. And it makes no sense because if I'm not seeing you as my therapist, let's say, for 6 days and something happens, that week is just a total loss for me now. right? Because I'm just sitting here stuck with no answers, no way to move forward in my feelings, whatever it may be. And certainly in the dating relationship space, someone's not waiting 6 days for a response on something or a reaction to something because you haven't seen, your coach or therapist. So I'm of the mind to continually move forward, however that looks, even if it's as slow as molasses. I don't care. It's still moving the needle forward. So I pretty much do everything different than a therapist does. And I've seen the results from it. And I love actually being in relationships with my clients. I mean, if they fly in, we have dinner together. I really truly root for my clients. I care about who they are, what they're doing, what they're, about. And I think a lot of therapists think that that's a bad thing. I love that. And I'm incredibly proud of the fact that I get to be so involved, where I have clients reaching out to me months later, years later even, saying like, I'm engaged, I have babies, I got that promotion, or, whatever it is. Like, that's what this is all about. It's a very different type of relationship than what I was taught to have, which there's this power struggle, there's this kind of divide. It feels very funky, very off. And I love being very open and honest with my clients and sharing that I'm not perfect. I've never been perfect. How I have handled certain situations. There's just the code of ethics that I swore to in being a licensed therapist. I don't do any of them. Or I'll say most, maybe not any. But I'll say most, to where I'm much more of a coach and a mentor than I am a therapist, because I don't believe in the practice particularly. So that's where the anti-therapist came from.
I love that. I mean, to be honest, I've had some good experiences in therapy and some horrific experiences in therapy. The good experiences are that they taught me something that I didn't know before about personality disorders and things like that when I was coming out of some toxic relationships, well, one in particular. And then the really bad stuff was being dragged through the family court system with some of the so-called expert therapists in that system, which was nothing short of cruelty to both me and my child, in my opinion. And I see it happen to a lot of people. So I do think you're right. And I love the premise that, therapy, I think it does play a place in, society. I think some people really enjoy it and get a lot out of it. And like you said, there are some that do some real good, even though it's only 25%, which is shocking. But again, there are a lot that do nothing. And I see that. People will come to me for coaching, which again, as you said, is much more dynamic. It's much more solutions focused. And say, gosh, I've got more out of this session than I have in the last 2 years of therapy. And that's we're on the same page with that, which is why I love your specialist area here, because it's very much something that's close to my heart. I wanted someone to pick me up and say, do this and do that when I came out of my relationship, my divorce. And what I was dealing with there was coming out of something feeling completely overwhelmed. And yes, I had a lot of very negative emotions like fear and terror and panic and sadness and devastation, all those things. And when I went to therapy, I found I sat, like you said, in dirty bathwater in those feelings. And when people were asking me, my therapist was asking me, so how did it make you feel when he cheated on you with someone 12 years younger? I mean, do we need to go through that? Because, the answer is really bad. Like, really bad. And talking about it again, guess what? Makes me relive all those really negative emotions. So then I'd leave feeling like I'd almost picked a scab and things were worse again than when I'd gone in, which actually may have been a relatively okay, stable day for me. So I'm totally on the same page as you with that. So do you think then that what you're doing now, obviously it's quite different as a therapist to be mixing the two together. Do you think that this is the way that all therapists should go?
Listen, I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all approach, but I do think that because you're confined to doing specific things and not doing specific things, it just becomes very limiting, and you're not allowed to sort of have your own flavor that way, because you are, particularly bound, to those codes, of ethics. So I can just say what speaks for me, what works for me. And part of the reason, too, frankly, that I'm an anti-therapist is because I went to therapy since I was in high school, and one was probably worse than the next. I've never had a therapist to this day who was really, really good. I had one that was okay. maybe I could say good, but none of them have been great. And I now am the therapist to other people that I never received for myself. I do every single thing that I never received, and I kind of wrap it up into this packaging, that becomes what I do and how I do it. And part of the reason why I love seeing clients when they fly into New York is I get to hug them. Like these are people that I root for, that I care so much about. Like we have a relationship where some of them I talk to every single day. So like, yeah, it's a different type of relationship than that kind of once a week, kind of thing.
Yeah, I
And
love
like you
that.
said, and I totally agree, how does that make you feel? And how does that make you feel? It feels like shit. That's why I'm here. You know what I mean? Like how do you think it feels? Like you tell
Yeah,
me how that
yeah,
would feel for you. I mean,
yeah,
it's not that difficult, but that's what it is. It's like it's you sitting in your crap. You need to get the fuck out of it to live differently, to feel differently, to make different decisions, to attract different types of people, to have different energy. Like there's just no hope in that. And
yeah.
like you said, and it's totally true, you can have a client who's been in therapy for years and years and years, and you can have a session, maybe two, and they're like, I never learned any of this stuff, or was never put this way to me,
Yeah.
and I call my clients out when I need to, but I cuddle them when I need to also. And it just kind of depends in the moment. Like I kind of oscillate between the two in terms of what, a client needs in that moment. But I really want to be, that mentor. And I'm also someone who's been through the trenches. I went through my own coaching program. I didn't know what else to do. It's not even that I thought it was a brilliant idea. I couldn't find, like I said, a therapist to get out of my shit. And I looked around at my life and I'm like, holy shit, this is
So,
bad.
do you mind sharing some of your story with us? Because I know that it would resonate with a lot of people.
Yeah, so I've had trauma since I was 10, and we learn just kind of the construct of the world, or we start to around 6 years old. So to have 6 to 10, having that innocence and having that taken away sort of almost as quickly, I've never kind of lived carefree, right? And I had multiple things happen, at that age, kind of on forward. I started going to therapy when I was either 14 or 15. It was a horrible experience. She told me, this is the first person I ever told all of my trauma to, ever in my life at that point. And she told me that I had a lot to be sad about. And I was thinking, if I was thinking about killing myself, here's a suicide hotline number, and handed me a card and was like, see you next session, swear. And after about a month or so with my parents, I said to them, I'm not going back. I'm not doing this again.
It's utterly
Um,
irresponsible. I suppose maybe was she doing it to give you the support line in case you were thinking about it so they could stop you, or that was a.
I suppose so, but that was also not ever something that I said I was going to do. I mean, I was sad, I had a lot of shit going on. I definitely was a kid who, cried myself to sleep at night at times, and I was not happy. I didn't know what to do with all the pain, and shit that I dealt with, and my family was unaware of a lot of it. Some of it they were aware of, some of it not.
Do you know what that smacks to me, Diana, as someone that's had a patient commit suicide, so she's covering her ass.
But that's what they do. They try to diagnose you quickly because insurance needs that. They try to do a suicide risk, right away. Like it's just, it feels very clinical. It feels very sort of power struggle-y where, you're the one who knows everything. I know nothing. I'm an idiot. You're smart. I'm a mess. You're not. There's just none of that like real natural humanness to someone. Like that all just kind of goes away because of this sort of divide that's supposed to happen. Where I again do the opposite. I go to the opposite end where I pour into my clients, and I care about them. I think about them. If they're going, on a date or if they have a business meeting or they're confronting someone or, whatever it is that they have going on, I'm thinking like, I wonder how that went. They have to tell me, like I'm so involved because that's what it takes. Do you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like that's really what it takes to be a constant in someone's life and to show people that not even just as a therapist, but as a human being, that not everyone sort of sucks.
Yeah.
Not everyone leaves you, not everyone disappoints you. Like you have that consistent person in your life for as long as you choose who really is one of your biggest cheerleaders forever.
Yeah.
Doesn't
And
matter how long, I'm working with them.
I love that. I mean, that's very much the philosophy. I set up a training school to train people to become breakup and divorce coaches because, yeah, there wasn't any help for this kind of thing apart from therapy, which is what I went to. And then I was having those questions and I was like, it makes me feel terrible. So stop asking me that question. How do I feel? Because isn't that obvious? And so I wanted someone to say, right, Sara, what you need to do is this, then this, then this. And like, how do I get rid of the heartbreak? How do I stop the pain? How do I sleep at night? How do I, deal with these legal letters that are just traumatizing me every time they come through the letterbox at that point? And, all those things that were going on. I just wanted someone to say, right, try this, test this. How about this? This works, try this. Do this, say this, practice this. And so that's what I created, really, to get me through my breakup, because I couldn't do it by just talking about the pain and talking about what was wrong. Because what you focus on, you see more of, right? And if you're focusing on all the pain and everything that's wrong, how on earth do you create that future? I mean, now I see most of my clients, the future looks like one of two things. It's either a blank canvas or it's a black hole. And so I teach my coaches to do what I call tandem coaching, which is whilst dealing with the present day heartbreak or co-parenting issues, we're also looking at shining a light into that black hole and throwing as much colour onto that blank canvas as we possibly can. So they've got something to move towards, because if you've got nothing to move towards, you don't know what it's like, or you're constantly looking in the rearview mirror, then you're never going to be able to move towards something you can't see, or you don't know what it is. So actually creating that and giving them that ability to tip that balance just a bit more towards the future creates that momentum. And also they've got a step-by-step plan to follow, which I think is just essential, don't you think? To have the steps to follow makes such a huge difference.
You need the blueprint. You need the action steps. It's what I call the morning and evening routine. And some of them are just, I don't care who you are, they're things I want you to do regardless. And there's some things that are going to be personalized to you once I understand better, which takes me one session, to really understand who you are, what you need, where the holes are, and we need to just fill in those gaps and holes with some strategy. It's not, a whole overhaul, for most people. It's just a couple like tweaks and a couple things you need to do. You need to do them religiously, and with real intention and discipline and so forth. But most people are not as fucked up as they think that they are, right? I mean, there's just certain things that need to get done. And interestingly, you and I have very similar stories. So back to my story, I was just a mess with finding therapists. One was worse than the next. I had one in my 20s. My father passed away, and I went to see a therapist. And this was someone who was supposed to be amazing. I was went to a top 10 school in the U.S. for what I did for a living, to become a psychotherapist. And I asked one of my professors who I did like, and I ended up working with his wife, who was, again, very well known. And after a while, there were $250 sessions, and this was over 10 years ago. I was in grad school. I was paying New York City apartment prices. I just couldn't do it anymore, and I, wasn't working. So I told her after a couple of months that I just couldn't swing it anymore. That's fine. She doesn't need to do that. But to, help me find someone else, let's say, who worked on a sliding scale or whatever the case may be. And she told me instead to commit insurance fraud and claim that I was working for my mother so that I can be on my mother's insurance and continue working with her. I mean, I can't even tell you the stories that I have. And I think I thought that it was just me, somehow that had these stories. But then, the more and more, this is obviously years ago, so I'm certainly not. I mean, I have stories upon stories upon stories that are just, one is worse than the next and more shocking than the next. So in my 20s, actually I was probably around 30 at this point, a long story, but the short version is I lost everything. I trusted an ex-boyfriend of mine who put me in touch with someone else in my business who ended up being a con artist and had done it to many other people as well, in the fashion industry. So I lost 6 figures of my money. I lost all my money. I lost my apartment. I lost my boyfriend because I didn't trust him. I lost my best friend who introduced me to my boyfriend. Literally everything, all my money, everything. My relationship, my business, and my business was very much kind of on the quieter side. It had every single part of my father's memory in it. You just wouldn't know. It was all very subtle. I did the same thing with my wedding where no one would ever know on the outside, but I had multiple things, that my father's memory was all over. And I do that in every business I have and everything I do. So then I felt like I was letting my father down. It was so deep, so fucked up. And I sat on my floor of my apartment that I was about to lose. I lost literally everything in my life. And I sat on the floor of my apartment by myself, cried, spoke out loud to myself. And I just said, how the fuck did I get here? It just was a disaster. And it was one of the most humbling, difficult, sad, overwhelming, embarrassing, moments of my life. And but it was really just a amalgamation of just everything I've been through, having no proper help. And on the outset, everything seemed fine. I didn't have a drug issue, never drank a lot, never really had any vices. Like I seemed like I was fine and I was like cute and like dressing nicely and everything seemed fine. And I was very good at faking, my happiness and all of that. And so I sat on my floor and I said to myself, you have a choice to make. You can either move in with your mother and just sort of exist, but actually genuinely be okay with it. Or you can create an entire new existence where a lot needs to change. And, it's up to you, what you want to do, but you have to commit to that. If you're going to do it every fucking day, you got to commit to doing that and bettering yourself. What are you going to do? I chose option B. Then it was like, okay, well, how am I going to do this? So I said to myself, you know what? If I can do this for other people, let me at least try to do it for myself. I know that sounds really strange to become your own client, but if I can't find someone else to help me, I see that there's a mess here. And if I can help other people, let me at least try it. Let's see. And I committed to the process, and that was almost 10 years ago. I haven't looked back. I have a business that fulfills me in a way that I can't explain. I have accolades and press that I'm, incredibly proud of, and I've helped so many people, and I love that. I mean, again, I can't tell you what that does for me. It's so healing for me. I have a husband who adores me. I have 2 healthy children. I live in a beautiful home that I never dreamed, I could be in. And it's not that every day is peaches and rainbows and unicorns shooting out of my ass, but to think that that girl, where she was heading to where, the woman that I am now, it's amazing. But it's not that I'm so amazing. It's that I just decided I had a sort of fork in the road type of moment. And I said to myself, I'm done just being a shit magnet and having crappy people and things and relationships and everything, just throughout my life. And I just wanted more. I set the bar higher and I did the work, and it's not fun. It's not fun. It's not sexy. It's not quick. This is a long-term thing, and every rung that I walk up the ladder, a new version of me, more clarity, more confidence is needed. So this is a lifestyle change and a choice. This is not like a let's race to some end point and just be done with it. It doesn't work like that. You have to continue doing it forever for the rest of your life, just like everything else in life. It all requires maintenance.
Some quick wins on the way. I think there definitely can. There's some tools that, like you, I created that would get me out of my pain during my breakup. And I know some things can work, and they can work quite instantly to dial down how you're feeling, even instantly sometimes. But again, it's building those in, as you say, to your toolkit so that you've got those, and you can't just do it once and expect it all to be fine. You've got to keep doing it. It works, but you've got to keep doing it. And some days you want to crawl into bed, pull the covers over your head, and just eat crisps, so we call them here, chips, you call them over there. That's fine. You can have days like that, but again, you've got to be able to bounce back. You've got to be able to pull yourself out, and you've got to be able to recognize what your coping mechanisms are. I love your story. I mean, I think it's so inspiring, and I think sometimes you have to hit rock bottom to get to that point where you decide you have a choice, really. And that's definitely what happened to me. There's a pivotal time when I was in Australia, and I just found out my husband had cheated on me. He no longer wanted to be married to me. We hadn't actually been married for very long. It was about 2.5, 3 years. My son was only 1, and it was like, wow, he not only doesn't want to be married to me, but he's met somebody else, and this somebody else was 12 years younger, stunningly beautiful. Neither of those things help. And I found out within a couple of weeks that she was pregnant as well. So for me, my whole world imploded. We worked together as well, and we had an office in Australia as well as London. So I got out to the Australia office. And I don't know whether you see this with your clients, Dana, but when you suddenly find out that your partner's been having an affair, suddenly everybody else that knew that they were having an affair has this sort of breath of a sigh of relief almost, that you now know. So they don't have this horrible secret. They're not sure what to do or whose side to take or how to tell you, or is it their place, which I get, it's understandable. But then they feel like, oh great, so now you know, let me tell you my story where I found out and what they were doing at that point. And I'd had so many of these stories on top of my own horrific story that I'd been cheating for at least 6 months. And then every time I met someone I hadn't seen for a while, they say, oh yeah, well last time that I saw them, then this is what happened, and did you know this and did you know that? Because they're kind of almost having a bit of a cleanse and going, all right, now at least I've told Sara everything. And I'm going, but that really hurts. And I remember leaving the office after another one of these like revelation stories, and I'd taken myself for a walk, and I was sat on Balmoral Beach looking at the white sand and the turquoise sea going, I just can't cope with this pain. I literally, it's a physical pain. Even though it was a heartbreak, which isn't a physical pain, I felt like my whole body was in agony. And I was like, I have a choice. I either let this define me and this pain becomes the grey cloud permanent fixture in my life, or I say, screw you, watch this. I'm going to turn this around. I'm going to create my own tools, because there aren't any that I can find, to get me and my son through this. And then when I'm out the other side, I'm going to make sure other people have access to them so that they don't have to feel the same way I'm feeling. And that gave me such a motivation to change, because in that moment I just thought, oh, I wouldn't care if the whole world just swallowed me up right here and now. But having that change of like, I accept accountability, and I call it like the clapping for your ex moment, where you start going, okay, I'm not applauding your bad behavior, but I am applauding the fact that now I have an opportunity to step up, to learn who I really am, to learn what I'm really made of, and to turn my life around. And if it starts here by taking accountability and stop giving away my power by saying, well, he's done this and he's done that and she's done this and he said that, that keeps me stuck. So for me, it's self-empowerment time. It's hard, like you said, there's no magic wand to take away all the pain, but there's definitely things you can do to tip that balance. And then once you get that momentum, life becomes a little bit more bearable every day, becomes easier every day. There are moments where you can completely eradicate that pain. So it's about building on that, as you say, and creating that toolkit to get you through. And that's literally what we do now. And my training school does that too. We now trained over 600 coaches in 27 different countries to help people dealing specifically with breakup, divorce, and also domestic abuse, which I know is a topic that's very important to you. Do you see a lot of that in your work, Diana? People coming in from toxic relationships?
I do see some of it, and it's heartbreaking. And it comes in so many forms. And I think a lot of people think that if they're not being beaten up daily, that it's not abuse. They don't think about, right? Like they think about the worst case scenario. And if it's not that, it's not that bad. But the justification, that people have on both ends, of receiving it to doing it is heartbreaking and horrible. And I do have some clients that I'm working with even right now that are dealing with that in different forms, in different ways. And then I have some that dealt with it when they were little, by a caregiver or, someone close in the family or a coach or a teacher, whatever it may be. That's part of it. You just don't know what people have been through. You don't know people's stories. You don't know their origin. And it creates so much pain and expectation. And to get out of that kind of place, regardless of when it was or if it's even still going on, is incredibly difficult. We don't have the tools generally, naturally, to get out of something like that. And the way that we, again, justify these things and make excuses for these things and just kind of living uncomfortably comfortable and being more afraid of what's out there and being by themselves than staying in something, they would rather stay in it, is my job, to kind of undo a lot of that thinking, a lot of what's been ingrained in people's minds that has warped reality and created problems for themselves. And when you look back with a lot of people, you see the patterning, and, it makes sense. I mean, I had some of it when I was young, and the people pleasing, that happens, and saying yes to things that I don't want to say yes to, and having no boundaries, and no respect for myself. And, it's like you look backward, it makes sense. It's not our fault what's gone on, but it is our responsibility to do something about it and to help empower people. And it's men too. It's not just women. I think a lot of people, just sort of picture a woman being, beaten by a guy. That's generally what people think. It is so much bigger than that. And a lot of it's a lot more quiet than that. And obviously, like I said, there's men, they're very much on the other side of it, being abused as well by women, by caretakers. But, it's not a one-sided conversation. And it breaks my heart. And it's something that needs to be talked about and dealt with more. There's been some work, where you do see some celebrities, let's say, talking about some of their past and their history, which is super brave and helpful for people. But there's a lot more work that needs to get done. I'd love to hear your perspective too.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Domestic abuse is something that is so much more than physical violence. In fact, in the UK, we call it domestic abuse, not domestic violence anymore, just because it covers coercive control, psychological, emotional abuse, financial control, as well as sexual control. I mean, there's so many different areas to it. You can't just really pigeonhole it. And usually, if there's coercive control, there's financial abuse and sexual control as well. So there's it sort of, you don't usually just get one thing when you start looking beneath the hood. And you're so right to stay in those relationships. We have to be highly empathetic, and we also have to minimalize it and normalize it to stay there. And often, as confidence is chipped away, which is the insidious nature of domestic abuse, usually doesn't start that bad at the beginning, and it's just a slow burn until you don't really know how you can get out because you've lost your confidence and you've lost your self-esteem. So it's definitely something that is, especially I think COVID shone a huge light on it, because a lot of people couldn't get out. Even for children, going to school is a way to escape the abuser, because you're at school for those hours and then you go back to the home. So again, there's so many people that are impacted by it, and I think the awareness has definitely shifted. There's a lot more TV, movies, documentaries, dramas about these things, which I think is a great thing. I still think, though, in the legal system, it's just woefully behind. Either there's a lack of training, a lack of understanding, and also a willful intent, unfortunately. It's my opinion that it's very corrupt, especially the family court system over here. Because there's the conflict of interest from within the system to act a certain way, to say certain things. It's just really quite a cesspit of misogyny and corruption at the moment, which is something that there are very good people in the system trying to change it, not enough, and maybe not shouting loudly enough or being able to, because there's such small numbers. But I spend my life picking people up who have been through that system and chucked out the other side. And statistically, there was some research done by the court said over here, which is a body, who said that 82% of people coming out of the family court system who were victims of abuse going in, which is why they were dragged through the court system, 82% of them were re-traumatized by the court system and the people in it. Now, that's not their abuser, that's the court system and the people in it. That's horrific. I mean, that is not fit for purpose. And as somebody that has been through that and makes up that statistic, I totally know, like living with PTSD, not actually from what happened from my abuser, but from what happened through the court system, that is something that is just not acceptable. And nobody is talking about it as well. We can't, because there's a lack of transparency here in the family courts. But then what that means is there's a lot of people coming out needing the tools to help them rebuild their lives, which is what I created to get me back on track. So that domestic abuse part, and empowering parents to know that a lot of us feel really guilty because maybe the other parent isn't very healthy, toxic, abusive, and that we chose that person as the parent for our child. That's pretty hard to get your head around, because you've got to live with that, and your child is the most precious thing to you in the world, and then you feel guilty for that. But actually what we do now is we empower the parent to help the child to be able to flip this around, so they can manage the dynamic of that relationship carefully. They can understand the rights and wrongs when they're in their own safe home with the healthy parent, and also to know that you only need one healthy parent to be okay. You don't need two. And in fact, in some cases, having one healthy parent and one unhealthy, I'm not talking about extreme abuse, but one unhealthy, toxic parent can actually be a really good life lesson for children, because they learn that life doesn't always go as you expect it to. They learn coping mechanisms to manage that person. If they learn the tools that we share, again, they'll know how to do that in a healthy way, and to then hone their radar to spot the signs so they don't repeat those mistakes that we made as the parent getting into this situation, because they'll have seen it and they'll know how to manage it, and they'll avoid that situation for themselves. So, there is a silver lining from some of the pain. But I think, ultimately this is a big issue, right? And it's something that's global. It's not just here in the UK. You see it Australia, US, every country. And it's just, there aren't enough of us talking out about it, I don't think, loud enough.
It's true. And I think a lot of people will take certain issues and magnify them and make them something they're not. A lot of people use the word narcissism when someone's just an asshole. And those are not the same things at all. The grooming, that goes on with narcissism, and there's, the grandiose, thoughts that these people have and the games that they play to bring someone so low and then kind of give them that little treat, that little something to kind of keep them in, and then do it all again and it just goes cycle through again. It's really heartbreaking to watch, and people will use these buzzwords because it's really what it becomes, and these sort of trendy things to call things. It's really damaging and a problem. Same thing with depression. People will say, oh my God, I broke a nail, I'm so depressed. We use, these labels, depression. I mean, yes, there's mild, moderate, and severe depression, and there are different levels. But depression is like laying in bed, not being able to get out of bed, feeling hopeless. I mean, it is not what people think it is. So we use, as much as we're talking about mental health and saying how important it is, which is good because it hasn't been. So there's more conversation, which I love. There's also still a lot of that kind of pushing down, twisting things, labeling things that are not exactly true. And it just makes people that are either confused or scared to get help or unsure of themselves, it just kind of feels all that much more tangled. Do you see that too?
Oh, all the time, all the time. I totally agree that there's people are bringing in. I don't use the N word. I call it the narcissist word in my training because that puts the focus on the ex. I don't want them to focus on that. I want them to focus on them, the healing, and where they're going. And yes, we need to understand tactics, and they know their pet psycho better than anyone else. So again, there will be some reference to what they're dealing with, but ultimately, we don't want to focus on them. But that's the problem, because our whole lives become about them, because they're the focus, the epicenter of everything, because it have to be. Otherwise, it feels like they'll just be angry or upset or make our lives difficult. So. But the tools that we use help to rebalance that and actually disassociate emotionally. Because most people won't be living with when by the time come to me as a breakup coach, they usually aren't living with that person. But they may as well be, because they're renting space for them in their head 24/7. So there's tools to dial down that attachment and to take your power back and in a safe way. I mean, obviously you can't just go about and say, right, I've had help, and confront them with it, because that'll increase the risk level and the problems. But we have ways of managing that. So yeah, it's a delicate one, and it's a bit depressing, isn't it? So why don't we talk about something that's a bit more fun, although terrifying, probably in equal measure for a lot of people, which is dating. Now, you talk a lot about dating. What do you think about dating in this day and age with the apps? Do you think that's a good thing? Tell us what you think, because I know a lot of my clients are terrified about this.
So there's two sides to it. In theory, I love the idea. Just the access to people. I met my husband that way. It's there's a lot of good to it, and there's people you'd never meet otherwise. It's so easy, it's so convenient. It's almost like there's no excuse. Right? You don't have to have that social anxiety issue. That doesn't matter. A lot of people don't know where to meet people. I'm not a bar person. I don't want to meet someone there. Where am I supposed to go? I don't want to meet people at work because that feels like it's something I shouldn't do. And so where am I going to come across people? So I love the concept of it. The problem is that people catfish, people lie. It's very flaky. You have so many options, so you're just flooded where you don't even know like what to do, where to go. It's very overwhelming. If you're a decent looking person, your inbox is just flooded, so you just feel overwhelmed. And then people get upset when you don't respond, but you're not sure exactly what to say. There's a lot of skills that people don't realize, that when your profile says super negative things about something, or if you're like, I don't even know why I'm on this app, it's so embarrassing. Like, that's not what your profile needs to show. Everyone's on it. Anyone who's single pretty much are on apps. It's a normal thing. People don't know what to say. They don't know how to message people. They just say, hi, how are you? If I'm being flooded with emails from people and your best is, hi, how are you? It's not most likely going to get a reply.
No, it's
And
not.
people will leave things out. They'll leave out the fact that they have a child. They'll leave out that they were married a couple times. And there's nothing wrong with these things, but you need to explain them and share them. Some people say they're 5'8", and they're definitely 5'5". Some people will put pictures of them from 4 years ago.
Oh yeah.
Not a good idea, right? So there's just a lot of don'ts, unfortunately, that people knowingly put themselves in situations that they shouldn't, and it becomes a problem, and it makes people that are skeptical that much more cynical on just the whole dating process.
I do think though that it shows people's natural sort of style. So there's, you know, you shouldn't date me if, and then you have to write a list of things. And I think that really shines a light on some personality issues, and like it's a red flag if people have that, really, because that's not a great sort of positive outlook. But a lot of that is very controlling. So if you want to avoid a controlling person, just swipe left on the people, and if that's a no, so swipe no for the people that say, don't date me if you have, I don't know, pink nails, and you know you don't reply on the first thing, and you don't do this, and you won't do that, and you're this, and you don't, you know. I'm like going, geez, like you've got such a list of things that you don't like. I mean, you haven't even met me, don't know me, like what the hell? So those kind of things are, I think, a really good sign. So I hope not everybody is listening to this, because that is a good filter for a lot of my clients to say, if they've got that up there, just don't bother with that lot, because that's a warning sign in my book, right?
It is. And a lot of people will focus more on what they don't want than what they do want. And just because you say you don't want this type of person or that type of person, the people that are those types don't know they are. So you're not actually doing anything to tell people to stay away from you. And if, certain people will say, you need to be blonde, or you need to be 6 foot, or you need to be this, or you need to be that. What are we doing? Like, those are the exact reasons why you're single. Like, your partner's height has nothing to do with how they are as a partner. I understand if as a woman you're 5'9", like you probably don't want to date a guy who's 5'5", right? And I'm like, okay, I can understand that. But to go as far as to actually put that on your dating profile, it's very negative. People have a very cynical view on, or they'll say, I hate the fact that I'm on here. It's this, it's all just kind of very negative.
Please put me out my misery because nobody replies to me, and I'm really hoping you will, or something. It's like, okay, that's not a good advert for yourself either. So self-confidence and a belief in yourself, or be better. But anyway, don't need to shine a light on the flaws. Let's just, but I mean, I guess that's honesty, isn't it? Maybe, I don't know. But I mean, it is a bit of a minefield out there. So just to sort of come to a close, really, I'll just is there anything positive that people can do that will help them on a dating app?
Yeah, I think it's very much about diversifying. So use the apps because everyone's on there. Like I said, it's convenient. You can hop on whenever you want. You can respond whenever you want. But I also think face-to-face organic meeting is good too. So I think if you diversify and you do both, you're really covering both bases. And it's not necessarily that you need to go, girlfriend, wife, husband, boyfriend hunting. It's more so just keep your eyes open wherever you are. You don't need to specifically go somewhere to find someone. When you go to the grocery store, when you go to the drugstore, when you go to the gym, when you go wherever you are, there's people everywhere. And there's opportunity everywhere. If you're standing in line, right, at a bank, at a convenience store, at a cafe, like there's people everywhere, and people really want to chat with people. Don't say anything flirty and weird because you don't even know that you're interested in someone yet. You just know that maybe they're attractive, but just ask something that's just relatable and easy to open a conversation, see if you actually are interested. And that's it. So you're not saying anything creepy or weird or just out of pocket. Like you really are just having a conversation with someone, which is frankly something I do anyway when I'm online. So I'm not taking my phone out and just, being that person. It's actually interacting, because we don't do that at all. We don't acknowledge other people. We don't interact with people we don't know. We all have stressful days. We all have a lot going on. It's nice to just interact with people. And to hide behind a computer, and do it that way constantly kind of takes that social part away. And like you said, with the virus, like it really created problems where people just don't know how to speak to people. I mean, for several years, we were kind of stuck. I mean, where I lived in New York, it was one of the worst places consistently. You're just kind of stuck in your own little bubble. It's just weird. You forget how to talk to human beings.
Yeah.
So to have that skill is really important. Go out in your neighborhood, volunteer, be a part of the community, talk to people, network. It's important just for your life, in every way anyway, from a friendship level, professional level. So to me, it's about really doing both. There's 3 parts to a profile: your messaging, your bio, and your picture selection. There's a lot of stuff out there, in terms of what to do, the do's and don'ts on all of those 3 points. Look at them, look at your profile, and make those changes, and really work on yourself internally, because that's going to be huge. You can get as many dates as you want to get if all those things are working out. But if you're not in a good place mentally and emotionally, you're not going to find high quality. So those are my sort of quick tips on it.
Good advice. Love it. And then people talk about there being a secret to a successful relationship. What do you think, with all your experience and also being happily married, what do you think that secret might be?
Deal with your shit. Right? I mean, it's there's nothing, kind of sexy about it. It's really about taking accountability, doing the work, and it's not just before you end up with someone, it's during also. It doesn't end, right? So I think a lot of people have this idea and this notion of like get your, heal yourself before you're in a relationship. I mean, healing yourself fully is not even a thing. It's going to be a continuous thing. And right when you think that you've done, all of it and you're healed 100%, the universe is like, no, no, no. And it shows you some trigger or something where you're like, oh shit, there is more work to do. There's always work to do. But it's someone who also has a growth mindset, who wants to do the work, who has some self-awareness. So it's like, they have certain things about themselves that differentiates them from kind of the mass, right? Like they're willing to do things a little bit differently to stand out, to do the work, to not be afraid to have the kind of relationship where you can gently call each other out and hold each other accountable. Because if not, you're walking on eggshells. It feels very unsafe. Complacency is also a very big problem, which is attached to exactly what I'm talking about. It's you taking accountability and responsibility for who you are, and both sexes do it. I think a lot of times, men think women just kind of let themselves go and they gain weight and they're so stressed out and there's so much pressure and they focus so much on the kids and not them. But it's like I see it with men too, where they start to dress like shit. They gain weight. They don't, that appreciation and validation just goes out the window. Just because you've been in a relationship for a while, like, yeah, there's some safety and comfortability there, absolutely. But you're always dating your partner, always. Yeah. I don't care how long you've been together. There still needs to be that level that you hold yourself to be the best version of yourself. And that's where all this mindset stuff comes into play. It doesn't happen naturally for people. It's something that it's a choice, that you make every day to be the best version of yourself, to be the best role in every single angle of your life to play. And if you're not doing it, you're either plateauing or worse, reverting backward. So it's a very intentional action to be the best version of yourself. And that's when you'll see your life thrive.
I love it. Okay, one last question for you, Diana. My podcast is called Heartbreak to Happiness. And so what is happiness for you?
Happiness is, to me, it's about looking through the lens of who I was meant to be and not looking through the lens of my trauma and or what people expect of me. So for me, it's about continually growing and pushing myself to be the best version of myself, to be humble, to know that I don't have all the answers, but to work on myself constantly, knowing that I accept myself for who I am, but then there's certain parts of myself that doesn't serve me, and I know that, and I'm constantly thinking about that 2.0 version of myself and calling myself out when I'm not being that, and doing everything I can to work toward being that woman and protecting that woman to continue to stay in that empowered place.
I love that. And whilst you say you don't have all the answers, you definitely have a lot of them, Diana, and thank you for sharing so much with us today. Where can people find you and find out more about your work?
I'm most active on Instagram, Diana Mandel. That's where you'll see updates, things I'm doing, ways of working with me, and just finding out more about the whole anti-therapist approach.
I love it. It's refreshing, and I'm super, super excited that you joined me today. Thank you so much for your time. Great chatting to you.
Thank you for having me.
That's it for today's episode of Heartbreak to Happiness. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review to win a free ticket to one of Sara's virtual retreats. The retreats are a transformative combination of live webinars with Sara herself, coupled with empowering online video programs designed to help you cope better with your breakup and start feeling happy again. For more details, head on over to heartbreaktahappinesspodcast.com, where you can also get a copy of Sara's free gift. Thank you, and join us again on the next episode for another dose of Heartbreak to Happiness.